Hey Bougie click. Have you ever wondered about the silent epidemic of psychological abuse in childhood and its lasting impact on adult trauma? In today's video, we delve into this issue that quietly affects countless lives. It's not merely about harsh words or strict discipline, it's a persistent pattern of behavior that can reshape a child's developing brain and self-worth, with effects that reverberate into adulthood. We will examine the prevalence of this often overlooked issue, the real and enduring harm it causes, and the science behind its effects on mental health. More importantly, we'll explore pathways to healing and recovery, because no one should face these challenges alone. Let's get into it.
I'ma make you a fan.
Psychological abuse in childhood becomes adult trauma. Psychological abuse from parents or family isn't just harsh words or strict discipline. It is a pattern of harmful behavior that repeatedly communicates to a child that they are unloved, unsafe, shameful, or worthless. This includes humiliation, belittling, threats, intimidation, manipulation, emotional unavailability, excessive blame, rejection, and isolation. When it comes from the people supposed to protect you, it restructures your developing brain and your sense of self in chronic, measurable ways. Research labels these behaviors as psychological maltreatment or emotional abuse, and they have consequences just as real as physical abuse. Psychological abuse isn't subtle in its impact, it's subtle in its visibility. Schools and courts may ignore it because there are no bruises or broken bones, but mental health science does not. This is trauma that lodges itself deep in emotional circuitry. How common is parental psychological abuse? Before we talk about outcomes, let's talk numbers. It's shockingly common. Recent broad population surveys show that emotional abuse during childhood is pervasive, with prevalence rates that meet or exceed many people's guesses about physical abuse. One comprehensive study in Europe found emotional abuse was reported by nearly 23% of adults, more than physical abuse. Large meta-analysis data suggests that overall childhood emotional abuse, which includes parental psychological abuse, may occur in about 1/3 of children globally, more than physical abuse. Let that sink in. Millions of children grow up in environments where their emotions are dismissed, their worth is questioned, or their minds are manipulated by those meant to care for them. This is not fringe, it's epidemic. The damage doesn't fade when you turn 18. When psychologists talk about adult outcomes of childhood psychological abuse, they are talking about real, measurable differences in functioning across life domains, not just feeling a bit off. Mental health problems are commoner and stronger than most people acknowledge. A major systematic review and meta-analysis found that childhood emotional abuse and neglect are positively associated with an array of adulthood psychological disorders, including depression, anxiety, substance abuse problems, suicidal ideation or attempts, personality and eating disorders, stress-related symptoms and emotional dysregulation. That's not a laundry list of vague outcomes, that's the clinical spectrum of conditions mental health professionals treat every day. Another population-level study found that adults who reported emotional abuse in childhood were nearly 4 times more likely to use mental health specialist services later in life compared with those who weren't emotionally abused. Adults who endure emotional maltreatment as children are also more likely to experience somatic health problems, meaning their bodies bear the stress too, not just their minds. Verbal abuse by parents has been shown to be particularly potent. A large, multi-study analysis found that adults who were verbally abused as children, including ridicule, humiliation, or threats from caregivers, were roughly 1.64 times more likely to report poor mental well-being than those never abused, and this risk was higher than that from physical abuse alone. That's right, the nails-on-chalkboard tirade about your worthlessness from a caregiver may hurt more long-term than a slap ever did, because it sticks to your self-image rather than just your skin. What does this look like in adults? The patterns aren't abstract. If you grew up in a psychologically abusive family, you might see echoes of that in attachment and emotional regulation, Psychological maltreatment disrupts secure attachment in childhood. In adulthood, this commonly translates into fear of intimacy, difficulty trusting others, avoidance of emotional vulnerability, patterns of unstable or conflict-plagued relationships. These aren't quirks, these are attachment wounds formed when the people who were supposed to be safe were unpredictable, rejecting, or emotionally unavailable. Mental health burden. Adults with histories of emotional abuse score higher on depression and self-criticism, anxiety and hypervigilance, substance misuse as a coping strategy, traumatically conditioned responses to stress. In large surveys, adulthood mental health utilization skyrockets among those whose childhoods included emotional abuse. Brain and stress response systems. Neuroscientists have found that sustained verbal and emotional abuse alter the brain's threat and reward circuits during development, making children more reactive to perceived threats and less able to regulate emotions. That's not fluff, that's neurophysiology. Relationship with yourself. One of the most underappreciated consequences is a skewed internal landscape. Low self-esteem that feels normal because it's all you ever knew. Constant self-doubt. Harsh self-criticism learned from caregivers. A brain wired to expect rejection or hostility. These internal patterns drive adult outcomes such as career instability, chronic anxiety, poor conflict resolution, and persistent loneliness. It's worse when combined with other adversity. Childhood doesn't come in neat categories. When psychological abuse overlaps with physical abuse, neglect, family violence, or household dysfunction, the effects aren't just additive, they are synergistic. This means more diagnoses in adulthood, greater functional impairment, lower overall well-being, higher risk behaviors and self-harm. Abuse doesn't have to be violent to be damaging. The emotional atmosphere of a home, consistent rejection, fear, shaming, or hypercriticism alone predicts poor adult mental health outcomes. Why psychological abuse is not just words. Psychological abuse isn't just someone being mean. It is a pattern of behaviors designed to manipulate, intimidate, belittle, isolate, and control another person's thoughts, emotions, and autonomy without leaving physical marks. It's the kind of harm most people dismiss because it doesn't bruise the body, but it torments the psyche. Psychological abuse is also called emotional abuse. It operates under the radar, but it leaves lasting psychological damage similar to or worse than physical abuse. It can occur in romantic relationships, families, workplaces, friendships, and caregiving situations. Research shows emotional abuse isn't just hurt feelings. It predicts higher rates of post-traumatic stress symptoms than other forms of maltreatment and significantly worsens mental health outcomes decades later. In one study, emotional abuse was the strongest predictor of PTSD symptoms compared to other abuse types. Verbal abuse as a specific form of psychological abuse was associated with a 64% higher likelihood of poor mental health in adulthood, surpassing even the mental health impact of physical abuse in one major study. Verbal abuse during childhood, screaming, humiliating, blaming, leaves measurable harm well into adulthood. People exposed to early emotional maltreatment report significantly worse mental well-being than those who weren't abused. Psychological abuse isn't no big deal or something you can just forget. It is real damage to your mind, your self-worth, and your nervous system. It happens when someone uses manipulation, gaslighting, threats, humiliation, coercion, belittling, or emotional control to wear you down. A lifetime of this leaves invisible scars that are not imaginary. What psychological abuse really is. At its core, psychological abuse is about power and control, not a misunderstanding, not a bad day, not tough love. It is a systematic process where one person dominates another through psychological tactics rather than physical force. Here's what that looks like in real life. Gaslighting, the abuser makes you question your own experience, memory, or sanity. Constant criticism, not occasional feedback, but relentless put-downs. Humiliation and shaming, in public or private, meant to destroy confidence. Blaming you for their behavior, you made me do it. Classic deflection. Control of relationships or freedom, dictating who you see, where you go, what you do. Silent treatment or emotional withdrawal as punishment, a powerful tactic. Isolation from support networks, cutting off friends, family, or community. This isn't occasional nastiness. It's a pattern, repeated over time, designed to keep you off balance and dependent. Psychological and emotional patterns. You make excuses for their behavior. You walk on eggshells around them. You feel guilty even when you know you shouldn't. You feel isolated from the world over time. Your self-worth shrinks under their influence. Subtle changes that are just as real. These might show up in you or someone you care about. Sudden withdrawal from friends and family. Loss of confidence or constant self-blame. Emotional exhaustion, anxiety, or fear of conflict. These signs are not personality quirks, they are patterns consistent with psychological abuse. Why we miss it, and why that matters. Psychological abuse is hard to spot because there are no bruises, no arresting officer, no hospital bill. Victims often internalize the abuse as their own fault. Abusers know this, they excel at rewriting reality. Even professionals sometimes miss it because there isn't always a clear checklist like there is for physical abuse. One research review noted that practitioners frequently report insufficient knowledge to recognize emotional abuse, especially in children where no physical signs exist. That's right, clinicians admit they struggle to spot this stuff even though it wrecks people's lives. How abuse rewires the brain and life patterns. Don't be fooled, decades of psychological abuse don't just leave memories, they change how your brain functions. Chronic toxic stress literally alters neural pathways that govern emotional regulation, memory, and social interaction. Those scars don't vanish overnight just because you're no longer in the situation. Emotional abuse increases the risk of anxiety disorders, depression, PTSD, sleep disruption, and difficulties with focus or impulse control, not just feeling sad. Abuse survivors often struggle with trust and connection because the brain learned danger where safety should be. These changes are physiological and psychological, not signs of weakness. Your brain adapted to protect you. Now it needs to adapt again to thrive. This is part of why many survivors report lifelong struggles forming healthy relationships, setting boundaries, or even identifying what normal love feels like. Statistical reality: abuse leaves big footprints. Let's not sugarcoat it. Survivors of long-term psychological manipulation meet criteria for complex PTSD, CPTSD, at extremely high rates, about 83% in some cohorts. Adults with childhood emotional abuse are 3.5 times more likely to develop clinical depression later in life. Roughly 80% of individuals reporting intimate partner violence also meet diagnostic criteria for PTSD. These aren't feelings. These are clinical outcomes that cost people years of joy, connection, and fulfillment. Truth bomb: you are not broken, you're conditioned. After decades of psychological abuse, your self-worth gets threaded with doubt, your body stays alert for threats that aren't there, and your emotional compass gets scrambled. You might recognize yourself in patterns like fear of confrontation even with supportive people, people-pleasing to avoid conflict, habitual self-blame even when nothing is your fault, emotional numbness or dissociation, difficulty trusting others or making decisions. These are symptoms of trauma, not evidence that you're inherently flawed. How you heal: the roadmap that works. Healing from decades of psychological abuse isn't instantaneous, but it is achievable with structured approaches. Professional, evidence-based therapy makes a huge difference. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, tailored for trauma has been shown to significantly reduce symptoms like PTSD, anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem even years after abuse has ended. Improvements not only persist over time, they can strengthen years after treatment ends. Data on trauma-focused therapies show large effect sizes for symptom reduction, meaning measurable change, not vague optimism. Some studies report 75% sustain remission months after treatment. 63.6% maintain long-term recovery several years out. Strong decreases in anxiety, depression, and dissociation. Meaningful changes often start early in therapy. So yes, transformations do happen. Support systems matter. You weren't meant to heal alone. Support groups, trusted friends, and corroborating relationships actually improve outcomes and reduce depression risk after trauma. Rebuilding internal life skills. Part of healing means retraining your internal world. Reclaim self-worth. Set and enforce boundaries. Practice self-compassion. Sculpt emotional resilience. Build new patterns of trust. These aren't soft things, they're neuroplastic changes that rewire your brain towards safety and connection. The neuroscience of your glow-up. Your brain is a luxury vehicle, not a junkyard. Here's what they don't tell you in those sad support groups: your brain is literally designed to rewrite itself. Neuroplasticity research shows that the human brain can form new neural pathways throughout life, yes, even after 30 years of psychological abuse. Scientists at Harvard discovered that focused therapy can physically reshape brain structure, with MRI scans showing increased gray matter density in regions associated with emotional regulation after just 8 weeks of targeted intervention. The statistics are clear: 75% of people who commit to comprehensive treatment experience improved health and social functioning. But here's the tea: most people never even try. Only 20% of individuals with trauma actually seek treatment. That means 80% are out here raw dogging life with unprocessed pain. Not you, beloved. You're reading this because you're ready to be in that elite 20%. The inventory: know your enemy's playbook. Psychological abuse leaves specific signatures on your nervous system. Research from the Journal of Traumatic Stress shows that long-term emotional abuse creates patterns that mirror combat PTSD, hypervigilance, emotional dysregulation, and chronic mistrust. But unlike physical wounds, these scars are invisible, which means people, including you, might gaslight yourself about their severity. Let's get specific about what 30 years of psychological abuse typically looks like. Your threat detection system is turned up to 11, you see danger in neutral situations. You've mastered the art of self-abandonment: putting everyone else first isn't noble, it's programmed. Your inner dialogue sounds like your abuser's greatest hits album. You attract people who confirm your worst beliefs about yourself. The data shows that complex PTSD from emotional abuse affects multiple life domains: relationships, career advancement, financial decisions, and health outcomes. Women who experienced long-term psychological abuse show 3x higher rates of autoimmune conditions and 2.5x higher rates of chronic pain syndromes. Your body keeps the score, but we're about to change the game. The wealth mindset: psychological abuse destroys financial confidence. Let's talk money, because psychological abuse specifically targets your sense of worthiness around wealth. Studies show that individuals with trauma histories earn 15 to 20% less than their non-traumatized peers, not because they're less capable, but because they've been programmed to accept less. The recovery process must include financial empowerment. Trauma-informed financial planning: yes, that's a thing. Rewiring scarcity mindset through abundance practices. Learning to negotiate from a place of worthiness, not desperation. Women who complete financial empowerment programs alongside trauma recovery show 3x higher wealth accumulation over 5 years compared to those who only focus on emotional healing. Your bank account is part of your recovery scorecard. The social architecture, curating your circle like a luxury brand. After 30 years of toxicity, your people picker is broken. Research on social recovery shows that rebuilding healthy relationships is the #1 predictor of long-term healing success. But here's the strategy: you don't need more people, you need better people. The data on social support is compelling. Quality relationships increase recovery success rates by 65%. Having even one secure attachment figure reduces relapse into toxic patterns by 50%. Group therapy participants show 2x faster improvement than individual therapy alone. But this isn't about collecting friends like Pokemon cards. This is about strategic alliance building. You need. The cheerleader celebrates your wins without jealousy. The truth teller calls you on your BS with love. The mentor has walked this path and emerged victorious. The accountability partner keeps you moving forward. The faith factor, spiritual strategy for sustainable success. Research consistently shows that individuals with spiritual practices have 40% better recovery outcomes. This isn't about religion, it's about connection to something greater than your trauma. Whether it's prayer, meditation, or simply believing you were created for more than survival, spiritual practice provides meaning-making framework for suffering. Community support systems. Daily practices that reinforce new neural pathways. Hope that transcends current circumstances. Studies show that faith-based recovery programs have 75% success rates compared to 40 to 60% for secular programs. The difference? Built-in community, accountability, and a framework for transformation that goes beyond symptom management. The plot twist: your trauma is your superpower. Here's what nobody tells you: survivors of long-term psychological abuse often develop extraordinary abilities. Research on post-traumatic growth identifies enhanced capacities in emotional intelligence, reading micro-expressions, strategic thinking, anticipating multiple outcomes, resilience, higher stress tolerance than average, empathy, deep understanding of human psychology, innovation, finding solutions where others see walls. You've been training in the hardest dojo for 30 years. Now it's time to use those skills for your benefit, not your survival. The hard truth and the sweet reward. Decades of psychological abuse can leave long-lasting effects, but they do not define you forever. The nervous system can relearn safety. The mind can restructure its patterns. The heart can rebuild trust. The shame can dissolve. Healing isn't linear. Some days will feel like 2 steps forward, 1 back. But with direct, consistent support and evidence-based tools, you will see measurable improvements in your emotional life, relationships, and sense of self. You are not damaged goods. You are a trauma survivor with capacity to heal, reconnect, and thrive. And yes, that's not just hope. That's research-backed reality. The bottom line: psychological abuse by parents isn't just words or harsh parenting. It's developmental trauma with measurable, clinically significant, and statistically supported consequences that follow a child into adult life. Psychological abuse is real, devastating, and significantly underrecognized. It is a strategy of control that becomes more entrenched over time, rewires emotional responses, and leaves deep psychological scars. It changes your brain, your stress response, your relationships, your self-worth, your mental health. And the damage isn't imaginary, it's validated by decades of research around the world. And the worst part? Because there's no cast on your arm, people, including victims themselves, often dismiss it. But research proves it is neither harmless nor rare. Understanding psychological abuse is the first step to calling it what it is, stopping the pattern, and protecting yourself and others. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into the impact of psychological abuse in childhood and how it echoes into adulthood. It's essential to recognize that this isn't just about harsh words, it's about a pattern of behavior that can leave lasting marks on one's mental and emotional well-being. If you or someone you know is dealing with the effects of childhood psychological abuse, remember that healing is possible. Professional help, supportive communities, and evidence-based therapies can pave the way to recovery. No one should have to face these challenges alone, and there are resources and people ready to support you on your journey. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more content that sheds light on important topics like this. Let's keep the conversation going in the comments. Your thoughts and experiences could be a beacon of hope for someone else. What do you think? Does psychological abuse in childhood becomes adult trauma? Let me know in the comments section. Stay bougie. Follow and support me. All links in bio. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Check description for more info. New episodes every day.